Jordan is playing the bookshelf game really well.
It's not a game, bro. Not a game. It's life. I'm grabbing the, it's not a game, bro. Not a game. Let me grab our YouTube link. Copy that into our notes. Copy that. And I'm going to grab all that copy. Start sharing it out to the world, letting them know that we are live. Ben, for all intents and purposes, we are a go, and it is now over to you.
Awesome. Well, hello, and thank you all for tuning in to Virtual Coffee with Ben. My name is Ben Blackman. I'm the Director of Development for Ridge. That's Royal Innovation Design Group, a group of innovation consultants based right here in St. Petersburg, Florida. Before we get started, as always, I'd like to encourage everyone to go to the Ridge YouTube channel to subscribe. You can also go to our Facebook page, hit the like button, and share our content. You can also schedule your own Coffee with Ben session where we can talk about how Ridge can help your company innovate more effectively. This series, of course, focuses on how companies innovate, how they strategically plan for the future, and how they create a strong culture for their employees. I'm very excited today to welcome our guest, Jeff Nischwitz. He is a man of many, many titles. Not only is he the founder of the Nischwitz Group, which is a speaking, consulting, and coaching company, but he is also a Story Debunker, a Leadership Sherpa, and a Chief Snow Globe Shaker, which we'll talk about in just a moment. As if that's not enough, he is the host of a impact leadership podcast, and he's the author of a new book. It's entitled Just One Step, which provides life and leadership lessons that he learned while walking on the Camino de Santiago in Spain. We'll get to that in a little bit as well. We're joined, as always, by Jordan Oppelt. He's the Director of Creativity and Innovation at Ridge. And we have a new guest today. Philip Leslie is joining us. He's in the background. Philip is one of Ridge's visual strategists, and he's going to be doing a digital graphic recording of our interview this morning, and we will be posting that later so that you guys can see all the great work that Philip and our team of strategists have been able to do. So stay tuned for that. So let's jump right in. Jeff, I don't even know where to start because you've got so many things going on in your life right now. I guess we should begin with when you started the Nischwitz Group. What was the basis for doing that, starting your own company, and how has your business changed over the 11 plus years that you've had the Nischwitz Group up and running?
Yeah, thanks, Ben. I'm happy to be here. And I hate to tell you this, but you forgot one. You may not know about it. I'm also literally this month, myself and business partner are launching an online leadership development ecosystem designed to help leaders anywhere growing their leadership. It's called Cardivera. So yeah, I've got a few things going on. So let's go back to the Nischwitz Group. The way I answer that question is almost always the same now. I'd love to tell you it was a great plan, brilliantly executed, but it wasn't. It was the best analogy is a car crash, and the truck rolled over a few times, and somehow it ended on its wheels, and it was still drivable, and the car and the driver were injured and damaged, but still here, and it was pointing in a direction, and I just kept driving. And people laugh at that, but it's really more true than false, because I started my career as a lawyer, did that 17 years. I call myself a slow learner. It took me 17 years to realize that I hated doing it. And I was very successful at it, though. And that's, one of the first life lessons I learned is even if you're really good at something doesn't mean you're supposed to do it, because many of us are skilled at things and can succeed without joy. And that was me. So I went on a journey, and that journey led me to business development, a lot like things you're doing, Ben. But I was always called back to have my own business. What happened was, the short version is I wrote a book that came out in 2007 called Think Again, Innovative Approaches to the Business of Law. And it was all about how law firms and lawyers could run their firms like a business. And I had a job at the time. I was doing business development, and someone bought my book, Miracle. And they called me and said, "Do you do coaching?" And I said, the appropriate answer whenever you get a question like that is, "Of course I do." And I proceeded to put a package together, got permission of my employer, and I coached 13 of their lawyers for, I don't know, maybe 6 or 9 months. I said, "This is really cool. This is what I'm supposed to do, but I can't do that yet because I got to get some things figured out." I was in that mindset of, you got to figure it all out. And then the universe figured it out for me. And in February of '09, the company I worked for laid me off. Didn't see that coming, but the day they did, I was like, "Oh, there it is." So I jumped off a cliff, because it was a cliff. I was not financially in a good place to do that at all. And probably the worst time in my life to do that, but it was the best time, the right time. So I started what's now the Nischwitz Group, coming up on 11 and a half years ago. And it really has evolved, because in the beginning, it was very corporate-y. It had no heart. It had no soul. It had no me. It was just tips and tactics. It was good, but it wasn't fulfilling. And about 6 years ago, I got another call. I call it the call inside of me that said, you gotta make this real, Jeff. You got to make this what you believe it is. And I've been ripping it up and riffing it up ever since, when I really started to trust and say, just be you and bring the message that's in my heart, not the message that's in the books.
So that transformation happened about halfway through. And
Mm-hmm.
how is that really applied to the clients that you're working with now?
The main thing is that, and all of my coaching clients, and if I'm on stage, they're going to get the message the same way. It tends to be disruptive, but it tends to be disruptive inside here. It gets it gnaws at people. And my coaching work is very holistic now. You know, I just don't work with people who just say, "Hey, come in and tell me how to grow my business and make it better." Because I find that everybody's got something that's out of alignment in their life. You know, business is pretty good, but they don't have good relationship with their team, or they've got some strategy, but you know, their life's falling apart at home. They feel like they're failing with their partner or their kids or whatever it is. There's something messed up. And we do deep work. I mean, the biggest thing is, we're going to dive into what's those self-limiting beliefs they have. We're going to talk, you know, we talked before we got on here with Jordan, talking about archetypes. Some of my clients I do archetype work with, and we're digging into, you know, what's the story they have? Where did that story come from? So we are doing, you know, I'm often accused of being a psychologist.
Mm-hmm.
And I always say, no. I am not licensed for that, and I get results a lot faster. And I know I just offend all the psychologists, but there is some truth in it, because it's about getting down deep and fast.
Yeah. As I mentioned in the intro, you're a man of many, many titles, and I'm curious about a few of them. Can you give us some background on the Story Debunker? What does that term mean to you?
Well, it's really similar to what I just said. Mm-hmm. We live our lives through our stories. And there's two stories we have. There's the stories we tell, and we're all compelled and drawn to stories, but there's the stories in our heads, the stories about who we are, what we're supposed to do, what we're capable of, what we're not capable of. And the main story running through most of us is some version of "I'm not worthy." And so the Story Debunker is to help people break up that story, understand its origins, so that they can let it go. And because too often people try and approach this, I call it the Nike approach. Hey, just stop doing that. Stop it. It doesn't usually work very well. So I help people unravel. Call it pulling threads, unravel their story, so they can get back to what their authentic story is. So that's where the Story Debunker came from.
That's great. And I got to know about the Chief Snow Globe Shaker. Where did that come from?
It came from a stage about 3 years ago. This happens a lot. I was giving a speech, and the idea of snow globes popped in my head, and I just listened, and I didn't wait. I just shared it. And I'd never even owned a snow globe to my knowledge. But the metaphor is that snow globes are meant for one thing, and that is to be shaken. I mean, otherwise there would be nothing in it to shake. They're designed to be shaken, but most of them are never shaken. The reason is they look good enough as they are. They're pretty, they're good enough. And so I talk to people about leadership and in their life. It's so vital that you regularly shake up your snow globe, because if you don't, as soon as you stop shaking, what does a snow globe do as soon as you stop shaking it? It starts to settle. And that's what we do. We do it in our lives. We do it in our companies. We'll come in and we'll come in and go, oh, we're going to change everything. But pretty quickly we go back to normal and it's good enough. And so the metaphor of the snow globe is constantly shake things up, starting with yourself. And really critically, when you shake it up, you have to make fundamental shifts, because otherwise at the end, it's not going to really be different, just like a snow globe. The sand has moved, but it doesn't look any different. You've got to make some fundamental changes within the shaking process. So I call it shake and shift. And it's now on my new Florida license plate too. The license plate says snow globe.
That's a great metaphor, and I'm sure it's giving Philip some great visuals to work with there. I'm excited to see that. One of the things that I know you've been focused on a lot recently is providing leaders with tools to help them navigate through the COVID pandemic. So I'm curious what suggestions you have for people that are watching that might still be struggling to adjust their business and, plan for the future in a world that's rapidly changing. What advice do you have?
I have two. I'll call it the biggest one, is to be more human. I think even before COVID, I think we had a huge gap in leadership. We had a lack of humanity in leadership. Too many leaders, would say they really value their people, but didn't act like it. And right now, people are really struggling emotionally. Even if the business is doing okay, people in their personal lives are dealing with things they've never dealt with before. I mean, I don't know how many of you have kids, but all the parents are dealing with this education issue, and how are their kids going back to school, and they're homeschooling them now, but they have jobs. So people are emotionally in turmoil. So I would say to leaders, more humanity. Part of that is more communication. Another part is more empathetic listening. The other thing for leaders, which is pretty disruptive, I feel, is I call it throwing out the playbook. And to ask yourself this fundamental question, and this could be true in your business leadership, your personal leadership, is, am I and are we meeting this moment? Because this is a moment in time that is incredibly unique. And most of us are applying the same tools and thinking that we did pre-COVID. We're tweaking how we do business. People have sent everybody home to work remotely, but that's just a necessary response. That's not a fundamental shift in your business. And so the challenge I've offered people is, I said, I want you to assume that 3 years from now, so August 2023, business and life is about the same as it is right now. And that freaks people out. But people don't think it's as crazy as 6 months ago, because now we're 6 months into this. And I said, what would your business look like if you knew this was going to be true for 3 years? You'd have to do a lot of things differently than you are right now. And that, to me, is, I think, what needs to happen, because whether that's true or not, people are trying to take the same playbook and change. They're trying to, they got a pen and they're making some edits. I think in business and in life and relationships, we need to throw out the playbook and rewrite it. And that's scary to people. And, that's a great, great role that Ridge can play, because Ridge is all about innovation. And the thing is, innovation to me is not really being driven right now. Adjustments are being driven right now, but that's not innovation. Mm-hmm. That, sending everybody to work from home is not innovation. Yeah. It's just an adjustment. Yeah. The times call for real innovation right now.
Excellent. And appreciate the kind words. If you're just joining us, you are watching Virtual Coffee with Ben. I'm Ben Blackman, the Director of Development with Ridge, and I'm joined today by Jeff Nischwitz. He's the founder of the Nischwitz Group. It's a speaking, coaching, and consulting company. I'm also joined, of course, by Joran Oppeld, our Director of Creativity and Innovation. And we have Philip Leslie on as well. He is a visual strategist at Ridge, and is going to be doing a graphic recording of this interview. Again, if you like what you're seeing, you want to get more content, head over to YouTube to subscribe to the Ridge YouTube channel, and over to Facebook. You can stay tuned for more conversations just like this one. I want to talk, Jeff, about your new book. So this is called Just One Step. It's walking backwards to the present on the Camino Trail. When did you take this journey, and what made you decide to turn that journey into a book?
Yeah. Well, I took the journey in May of 2017. And I will tell you, the reason it became a book is because I was compelled to. But I will also tell you that there was I'll tell you the really quick story of how it happened. So I did the trip in May of 2017. I journaled the whole way. I really felt there was some really powerful insights and lessons I learned there that you don't have to go there to achieve, and a different way to live life, and a way to live life with, little or no stress, to be more present in your life, to see that, to fundamentally shift how you see your life in the world. That's one of those shifts I talk about. But I wasn't getting started with it. And what happened was in January of 2018, about 6 months later, my mom passed away. And I was in church on Mother's Day that year. So she had passed maybe 3 months earlier. And that was a very emotional day for me. It's Mother's Day, and my mom had just passed away 3 months earlier. And while I was sitting there, I was saying to myself, Jeff, you need to make a decision about this book. And while I was sitting there, literally the dedication came into my head, word for word. It just right there. And it was to my mom. And I walked out of church and said, I'm writing the book. And so that's literally what drove me to. So I had my head thought, but it was that heart moment with the connection to my mom that said, this book needs to be written. And I just launched it in April. It's funny. People said, I can't believe you're launching a book in the middle of COVID. I said, well, when would you launch it? Would you, it's done. What am I going to wait for? Because I'm not a waiter.
Yeah.
So I'm thrilled about it. That's my fourth book, and it's the book I'm most proud of.
That's great.
I
And
think
hopefully
it's an
people have a
impactful
little
book.
more time on their hands to read it right now. So maybe it's the perfect time. I'm a little curious about the trail itself. So it's in Spain. How long of a trail is this?
Yeah, well, there's actually three. It's so much you can learn about these Caminos. There are actually three Caminos in Spain. One starts in Portugal and goes north. One starts in France and but comes across the northern part, the top of Spain. That's called the Camino Norte. The most famous and the most traveled is the one I walked. It starts in France, goes over the Pyrenees Mountains. They all finish in the town of Santiago de Compostela. The Camino Frances, the whole thing is 500 miles. If you choose to walk to the sea, which you can do afterwards, it ends up being about 570 miles. I did 200 miles of it in 10 days. And the genesis of the Camino, it's over 1,000 years old. And the story is, there's no definitive proof, is St. James remains were interred in a church in Santiago. So people would make a journey from the Holy Land to northern Spain, to the city of Santiago. And so it started as a religious pilgrimage, but it has evolved. Now, some people walk it for religious reasons, spiritual reasons, health reasons. I want to get away reasons. I want an adventure reason. But the common thread, I would say, is virtually everyone on the Camino is in some way been called to it. And I know I was, and it was something I just had to do. And my intention is to still go back and do the rest of it.
That's great. And so you journaled the whole time and put it into a book, which you just released. What are you hoping that readers will take from your experience and your writing?
The biggest one is about the power of presence, of being present, and not just in interactions with others, which is really critical. But I've found that presence is an amazing tool. People try and focus or not be distracted, but presence, the outcome of presence is this: we are unstoppable when we are present, because when we are present, not only do we give the people around us a gift that it's the greatest gift on the planet, because in our moment of presence with them, what we're saying to them is, you're the most important person on the planet right now. And that's, I mean, think about the power of that statement by behavior. And the other is that when I'm in the present, I have no fear, because when we're in the present, we're not time traveling. I'm not uncertain about what's coming. I'm not thinking about what happened yesterday and regretting it or being angry about it. I have virtually no stress. That is the moment when I most believe in myself. And people say, well, I was present and was feeling stressed. I said, it's impossible, because stress and presence cannot coexist. And that is the final chapter of the book. So everything builds to it. But to me, that's the message I want to communicate, is we don't have to live life the way we're living it right now. And stress is a choice. Fear is a choice. They're not bad, and they're human. And I think it's impossible to live 24/7 in the present, but I spend most of my life in the present. And so I have navigated this time very different than most people, despite a huge downturn in my business. I mean, I'm a speaker. March 17th, my calendar for the year was wiped out, and it ain't coming back. So I've had to completely retool my business. So I've had all sorts of reasons to be stressed. And have I been stressed? Occasionally, but it's rare because of the power of presence. That's the drum I pound. That's the one that speaks from my heart of, oh man, if you could just find this space, folks, it'll change everything. It'll change all your relationships. It'll change your leadership. It'll transform your business. It's the secret sauce. It is the secret sauce.
Fantastic. Well, I look forward to reading it. Finally, I wanted to talk a little bit about the podcast that you're running. So I know you are still filling your time. You have the Impact Leadership podcast, which you host, and I'm curious what was the driving force behind starting that, and what your goals are with the podcast, and more importantly, where our viewers can go to actually listen or view it.
Yeah, the podcast, as I mentioned when we got on here, my business partner, Craig Matthews, who is in Raleigh, North Carolina, we're in the process of launching this leadership development ecosystem. It's an online resource for leadership development. And I call it, it's personal growth too. It's all, like I said earlier in my coaching, it's all mixed. And we decided to start, that's called Cardivera, CARDIVERA.com.
Mm-hmm.
We started the podcast to align with Cardivera, and Cardivera is just launching this month. We launched the podcast in March. I had no idea how much fun that would be. I'm not surprised now, because one of my most favorite things is just sit around and have conversations about things that matter. Well, that's what we do. We just have conversations. I've been blown away by our guests. We're starting to get international guests. We just did an episode. We recorded it recently. It's coming out tomorrow with a speaker and trainer named Kevin Basic from near Charlotte. And I mean, show notes. The show notes of that are so long, because like every word out of his mouth, I mean, I can't leave that out. That needs to be in there. So it is so much fun. I know Craig and I are learning a lot. I love being challenged. And I will tell you this, I have more hope for the world because of that podcast, because we're getting people on. And I said, wow, there's people out there actually doing it in a really beautiful way. And there are people who are making a difference in the work they do or in their companies. I get so jacked up about that. So you can find us on all the platforms for podcasts. We also have a website, which is impactleadershippodcast.com. To find me, it's not that hard, as long as you know how to spell Nischwitz, which is Nischwitz, because if you put in Jeff Nischwitz, you're just going to get pages and pages of me. So the website is nischwitzgroup.com. I'm on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter. I love to connect to people. I'm easy to find, and yeah.
Fantastic. Well, I encourage everyone to go check it out, and I might be providing a little bit of a spoiler here, but I know in September you will be featuring our founder and chief innovation officer, Michelle Royal, on one of your podcasts. So
absolutely,
stay tuned for that. We're very excited for that. We have just a few more minutes, and as always, I like to bring in Jordan, because he's always so patient. He's running the show, but I know these topics are things that he's very, very in tune with as well. So I wanted to give him the opportunity to ask you a question before we say goodbye. So Jordan, take it away. You have anything for Jeff?
Yeah, this has been great, Jeff, to hear you talk about business overlapping with leadership development and personal development and intention and spirituality and coaching and all of it together, right? So I think that, we're probably on the same page with a lot of things. And, in my coaching work, I used to hear the same thing you described earlier, which was, this is like psychology, or this is like therapy. And I would have to remind my clients, my coaching clients, like, no, therapists, psychologists, they focus deeply on wounding, and in the past, and they usually only treat with one tool at a time. And coaching is all about the future and keeping you accountable on the path ahead. And we're going to throw the kitchen sink at it. We're going to share every tool we have with you to get you experimenting in real time with what works and what doesn't. So I really appreciated you describing that. And speaking of that, I think in my life, I've transferred from identity to identity, leaping from lily pad to lily pad as a musician to a minister to a marketing professional to an author to a coach to a facilitator consultant. And I heard you describe a similar path, as well as describing the path for clients now in the world dealing with what you described as adapting versus innovating. And I wonder if you have any advice for people who are having to reinvent or really contemplate what their identity is now and how they're changing in the world and in response to the world. Is there a common thread that they can look for at their core, right? How do they identify what that is that keeps them that sense of self, that sense of purpose as they're moving through it?
Well, what I would offer on that, and there's so many ways to look at that. There's complexity and there's simplicity. That's, one of the things I tell people is if you're not willing to embrace paradox, this world's going to be pretty challenging, because this is a world built on paradox. The one that comes to mind for me is it doesn't give people the answer, but it shows them a path. And that is the biggest challenge is to really knowing who you are is there's a part of every person who doesn't want to know. They don't want to know. Now they'll say intellectually, I really want to know, man, and this is the phrase I hear all the time. If I knew who I was, or if I knew the direction, I would go there. I say, actually, that's not true. You think it's true, but there's a reason you don't want to know, because as soon as you know, you can't unknow it. And as soon as you know, you actually have to take action, and action is scary. And as soon as you know who you are, we face the biggest risk that we could ever face. And that is being judged for who we really are. And that is terrifying, but it's very easily overcome if we're willing to see, finding that space that says, I am good enough. And I might face some rejection. In fact, I will tell you, to your point, Ben, when you asked me about my business, the biggest shift for me when I did that was recognizing in order for me to have the impact I wanted to have in the world, I had to get rejected more. I had to be willing to get rejected more, not less. So the big one for me is to recognize we are our biggest obstacle, because we really don't want to know. In here, we don't want to know. Or actually, I go down here because that's the fear place for me, down here in my gut. So that's the big one. And the thing is, because if people don't believe that, they'll be in that loop their whole life. I'm just waiting to know. Once I know, baby, look out. Yep. Well,
yeah. And it's the Dunning-Kruger effect too, right? George Leonard has a book out called Mastery, which is pretty fantastic because it encourages us to kind of get ready for those. It could be 1 week, it could be 5 years, but that plateau that comes after you've mastered something, right? And you have to be really comfortable on that plateau. Getting hunkered down with, like you said, either being judged for who you are, with the identity you've claimed, or getting prepared for your ego to cling to it so tightly that you don't want to let go of it. You don't want to relinquish it.
We do a lot of holding on, of holding on. In fact, it was interesting. The guy we had on yesterday, Kevin Basic, the podcast, he had this really cool phrase. He said, and it's an example of vulnerability in leadership. It's very clear to me, the word is out. Vulnerability is the answer, but it terrifies people because they don't know what it is. They think it's all about emotion. But one example of vulnerability he shared is, he called it declare your identity. Declare who you intend to be, and then share it with the people around you. Share it with your partners in life. Share it with your children. Share it with your team members. But that's now scary because now I'm accountable for it. The act of sharing with someone who you intend to be, I love that phrase, declare your identity and share it with your stakeholders. Scary, but man, that's beautiful stuff.
That's it. We have Jeff Nelson watching online right now. He says that plateau is also addressed in a book called The Grit and the Dip.
Haven't heard
go.
that one.
Yeah.
Plenty of great reading and recommendations, but I do encourage everyone to pick up Jeff's new book, Just One Step. And unfortunately, that's all the time we have. I feel like we could keep going for hours here, but I want to thank you again, Jeff, for your time. Thank Jorn and Philip for joining as well. And if you're interested in learning more about Ridge and what we can do to help your company, just visit us at ridge.com. That's RIDG.com. And we hope to see you next time. Thanks, everybody, for watching. Take care. Jeff, best of luck to you and everyone.
Thanks, Jeff.
At
Thanks,
the Nischwitz
Ben.
Group.
Thanks,
All right,
John.
take
Thanks,
care.
Philip.
You bet.
Have a great day.
Take care.
See you soon.
Bye-bye.